Thanks, President John, friends, guests, fellow Rotarians. It truly is a pleasure and an honor to have our new Consul General of Israel to the Mid-Atlantic region, Yaron Sideman, to our York Rotary Club, the 35th largest club in the world. Many of us in Rotary may not realize that among Israeli citizenry, Rotary and Rotarians are all held in the highest regard. If you check your Rotary app that has all the Rotary locators that show where the clubs are, there are actually 57 Rotary clubs in Israel. I went on to it last night just to double check, and I counted. There is not only a strong bond between the United States and Israel, and a strong bond between York, Pennsylvania and Israel, there is a very strong bond between our own York, Pennsylvania Rotary Club and the Gedera Israel Rotary Club, too, through a musical instrument project with the Ethiopian students in Gedera, Israel, a few years ago. A project that continues to evolve and continues to grow to achieve towards success at some point. Rotary is a leading service organization in our little country, a little miracle of Israel. In fact, the Rotary Institute will be an international event from November 24 to November 28 later this year, bringing an estimated 700 international Rotarians from around the world to Jerusalem. This upcoming Rotary event falls during our nation's Thanksgiving celebration, so through our local JCC, we're also running another separate trip to Israel in early November, with an itinerary modeled after the very successful Rotary trip that we held in 2010. Visiting extensively Christian, Muslim, and Jewish sites. Feel free to contact me with any of your questions, as preliminary information is on all of your tables. Also, should you want to hear more from the Consul General than we are right now, or to suggest to family and friends to hear him as well, he will again be speaking this evening at the Jewish Community Center on Hollywood Drive at 7:30. Also, before introducing our guest speaker, I would also like to acknowledge the Israeli Consul in Philadelphia's new political director, Alex Lipton, who's joined us at that table. Alex can make us all very proud that he first received his higher education here in York at York College. His memories of college life here in York are extremely favorable, and he hopes to further this York-Israel relationship in upcoming months and upcoming years. He is also thrilled to be returning to his partial alma mater. He did transfer to Penn State, and like many of us here, is both York College proud and Penn State proud. The Honorable Yaron Sideman, through his responsibilities, serves Pennsylvania, Ohio, Delaware, Kentucky, and southern New Jersey. He is one of 7 Consul Generals serving various regions of the United States. He began his post based out of Philadelphia just this past August, and is the highest ranking diplomatic official representing Israel in this region. Mr. Sideman is a graduate of the Israel National Defense College. He served in his most recent position in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as Director of Congressional Affairs at the North American Division, where he was responsible for supervising and directing Israel's relationship to the United States Congress. Prior to these posts, Yaron served as head of the North American desk of the Diaspora and Interreligious Affairs Bureau, where he was, among other responsibilities, liaison of the Foreign Ministry to many American Jewish organizations. Mr. Sideman holds a master's degree in political science through Haifa University and a BA degree in psychology and philosophy from Tel Aviv University. Let us all give a Rotary welcome to our Consul General and my friend, Yaron Sideman.
Thank you so very, very much. By the way, I live in Israel, in Rehovot, which is about a 5-minute drive from Gedera. So my first order of business as I return from this posting to Israel is to become a member of the Gedera Rotary Club. I was, by the way, if I lose my train of thought at any given moment, it's because I was warned I have to keep an 8-inch distance from the asking someone not to think about the table. But thank you for having me here and for affording me this unique privilege of addressing you from this very prestigious platform. Need I say that this is the 35th largest Rotary? It's an exquisite setting as well. It's a real privilege for me, for Alex, all of us to be here. And thank you, Elliot, in particular, for setting this up, and as well as a remarkable day that I'm really anxiously looking forward to. We have just celebrated recently 65 years of Israel's independence. To me, it's nothing short of a biblical occurrence that 65 years ago we reinstated our sovereignty, Jewish sovereignty, over the land where we were born as Jewish people some 4,000 years ago. And that we have reclaimed Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, of the Jewish people, after 3,000 years since King David established it as the capital of the Jewish people, of his kingdom. And it's a miracle that we reestablished our sovereignty over our ancestral homeland after nearly 2,000 years that we've been in exile, scattered all over the world, 4 quarters of the earth, having no common land on which to unite, no common language with which we could communicate with one another, and yet we managed to sustain our national ambitions for that period of time, for so many thousands of years, and reinstate ourselves in our ancestral homeland 65 years ago. So this is the context, historical context, and the significance of that occurrence in my mind. No less amazing are some of the accomplishments that we've made, or achievements that we made in those 65 years since we've reestablished ourselves in the land of Zion. I mentioned no language, no common language for the Jewish people for 2,000 years of exile. Well, we've re-established ourselves in Israel, and we reinvigorated the Hebrew language as the spoken language in the state of Israel. Now, the last time Hebrew was used as a spoken language was during the times of the Bible. That's when it was spoken. That's when it was used as a spoken language. So for thousands of years, Hebrew was not a spoken language. Today it is. It's a spoken language in the state of Israel. We've established a very strong, vibrant, and stable democracy in an area which is neither democratic nor stable. And we did so without having any prior experience in governing ourselves as a people. Again, we've been in exile all over the world for 2,000 years. So in spite of it all, we managed to establish a very vibrant, strong, stable parliamentary democracy that exists to this day, under which, for example, there's an Israeli Arab judge presiding over the Israeli High Court of Justice. Or a member of the Israeli High Court of Justice. There are Israeli Arab political parties. Everyone has the right to vote, Jews and non-Jews alike. Everyone has freedom of religion, Jews and non-Jews alike. And the rights of everyone are respected. We managed to become from a country that had 0 foreign capital, from an economy that was non-existent, from a fledgling developing nation, we've become a developed nation, a member of the OECD, of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. 30 countries in the entire world are members of that organization of developing economies. And Israel today is in the forefront, as I'm sure you all know, of technology, of high tech. It's a magnet for multinational companies, Google, Microsoft, Procter & Gamble, and so many others, who decide that Israel and the innovative scene in Israel is where they want to open up their R&D, their research and development facilities. And some of their greatest inventions come from Israel. So from exporting oranges and being an agricultural-based economy 65 years ago, we became a global economy that exports primarily know-how. And that's a very well respected and very well demanded commodity these days. And we've had so many other accomplishments in those 65 years. We've, first of all, we established ourselves as a force to be reckoned with, and in otherwise inhospitable and somewhat challenging neighborhood. We were, upon our declaration of independence, we were invaded by 6 armies, and we managed to pull our way through and establish ourselves as a significant force in the Middle East. But we did not only do that, we also managed to establish, in the face of that hostility, 2 peace treaties with 2 very significant neighbors, Egypt and Jordan. So it's no less amazing than the fact that we have reestablished ourselves 65 years ago as a sovereign power over our ancestral homeland is the fact that we have gotten this far in the 65 years since. And I thought at the outset it was worth just mentioning that, since again, it's this month that we've celebrated our 65th year of independence. Nonetheless, we are living in quite a challenging neighborhood that's undergoing seismic changes of historical proportions, certainly in the past 2 or 2.5 years since the Arab Spring erupted. And I'd be happy to address that a little bit and answer any questions afterwards that you may have. First of all, it's important to note that Israel is not at the center, and certainly is not the cause of the chaos, if you will, that is unraveling in the Middle East these days. We see that chaos every day when we open the newspaper in Syria, in Egypt, Iran, primarily Egypt and Syria, but it really ripples, and Lebanon, but the ripple effect is practically everywhere. Turkey, Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf states. The entire Middle East is undergoing quite a significant sea change. Israel is not the cause of that sea change, but it certainly is affected by it and has the potential of being affected much more by many of the repercussions of those changes that are undergoing around us. And I'll talk about that in a minute or two, but I want to define very broadly what the general atmosphere is in the Middle East today. And it's an atmosphere of instability and uncertainty. The old order that we knew, or the old guard, has moved out, but the new order has not yet stepped in and established himself or itself. And that's true in so many countries. It's really becoming a very confusing area. In the past, it was very easy. Libya was always associated, for example, with Gaddafi, who rules Libya today? And that's been for decades. Syria was always associated for decades with the Assad family, be it Hafez al-Assad or his son Bashar al-Assad. Who's going to take over Syria, and in which direction will, whoever it is, lead it after Assad is gone, and after the Alawites probably will cease ruling Syria? Major question, big question mark. What is the strategy of President Morsi, the Egyptian president? I don't think that he even knows. Usually, and I don't know that there is a secret vault where all you need is to have a key and then you know all of the secret plans that Egypt has. I think that it's still information. The Muslim Brotherhood, if I'll just open parentheses here, that have gained power in Egypt after President Morsi, the Egyptian president, hailing from the Muslim Brotherhood and leading Egypt, they've been banned from the Egyptian political landscape for decades. And so they could have afforded themselves, they could afford to preach the very radicalized ideology that they hold from the mosques. But then, all of a sudden, one morning, they moved from the mosque to the parliament, and from the mosque to the presidency. And that burdens them with a whole set of responsibilities that they've never had before. And it puts the Muslim Brotherhood, their political leadership, in a very huge dilemma between ideology, and they hold a very radical anti-West, anti-Israeli ideology. I could go into the history of it, but I won't right now, of the Muslim Brotherhood, and its founder, Hassan al-Banna, and how he, the whole basic tenet of the Muslim Brotherhood is to impose forcefully, if need be, Islam as the way of life and as the political way of ruling. But all of a sudden, the main challenge that President Morsi has every day when he wakes up in the morning, he asks himself not how can I impose Islam over Israel or the United States, but how can I bake between now and tomorrow morning 100 million pita bread in order to feed my population? That is what he's asking himself, and he doesn't always come up with a compelling answer, and that's his main challenge today. So we're looking at an area that's riddled with uncertainty and instability, and that plays out all over the place, in Syria, in Egypt, in Tunisia certainly, in Libya, in Yemen, in Jordan and elsewhere, certainly in Lebanon. Now, that is that situation, on the one hand, creates many challenges. On the other hand, it also creates opportunities. Because as certain countries are apprehensive about repercussions of the Arab Spring on their turf, on their regimes, take Saudi Arabia for instance, Saudi Arabia is very, very fearful of a civil unrest, the likes of what happened in Tunisia and Egypt, that it will happen in Saudi Arabia as well. They're fearful of that, of civil unrest, of the rise of the people against the regime, something that we've never thought could happen in the Middle East, but did. They're fearful of the growing rift, which again is an outcome of the Arab Spring between Shiite and Sunnite, the Shiites and the Sunnites, the Shiite stream of Islam being led by Iran, and the Sunnite stream of Islam pretty much by Egypt or Saudi Arabia, and the growing rift between the two, which again is a result of, or has always been there, but has been exacerbated tremendously after the Arab Spring two years ago, poses a real threat on countries such as Saudi Arabia, which is fearful of what Iran will do, for example, if it attains military nuclear capabilities. How will that, what kind of leverage it will give Iran, and how will it allow it to assert itself and fulfill its hegemonic ambitions, both regionally and globally. So these are sets of challenges, but there are also sets of opportunities. Opportunities to form new alliances, opportunities to shape agendas that have not yet been formed, opportunities to reshape a region, especially when it is, as it is today, in a situation that is rather chaotic or on the verge of chaos. And I'll give you, again, I'll just as in order to illustrate what I'm talking about, an example. And then we'll perhaps go a little deeper into two or three particular regions or countries. But Israel's relationship with Egypt. If anyone would have told me, say, 2 years ago, that Egypt would be successful in brokering a ceasefire, effectively a ceasefire, between Israel and the Hamas, not just Egypt, but an Egypt ruled by the Muslim Brotherhood, that it would successfully broker a ceasefire between Israel and the Hamas in Gaza, Hamas being an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood that controls the Gaza Strip and adheres to the same radical Islamist ideology. I would have been quite unconvinced that that could be the case. Yet, that is exactly what happened after the recent operation that we held in Gaza just a few months ago. We entered into a few weeks of negotiations brokered by Egypt, because we don't talk directly to Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. And Egypt had a very pivotal role, we have to admit it. An Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt had a pivotal role in brokering a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza that pretty much holds water to this day. So that's one example of an opportunity that was seized and that was not possible before the Arab. I'm not saying that the Middle East today is better for us than it had been before. I'm just saying that we have to look at opportunities, not only at challenges and threats. So this is one kind of opportunity. Iran and the huge threat, or the increased threat that it poses today on the whole Sinai area, again, is an opportunity for us to engage directly, indirectly, over the table, below the table, but to engage and calibrate our moves with respect to Iran. How practically, in recent times, did that, for example, play out? The rapprochement between Israel and Turkey. Turkey is one of those countries that is very fearful of a growing Shiite dominance in the region. And it's that apprehension that perhaps softened somewhat its position with respect to Israel, and it's that joint challenge that Israel has with so many other countries in the region, Turkey included, of how to cope with Iran that's approaching military nuclear capability, of how to cope with a unraveling situation in Syria. It's those challenges that suddenly bind us together and bring us a little closer than we had been. Now, I'm not under any illusion that Israel-Turkish relations will evolve into a love fest of any sort. But the fact that we're managing to talk to each other today and to come to terms and to kind of normalize what has been a troublesome relationship in the past few years, I think is indicative of the fact, or is a result of the fact that we're facing the same challenges and that have been heightened or exacerbated certainly in the past 2.5 years since the Arab Spring. So we're looking at challenges, we're looking at opportunities. I'd like to perhaps focus on 2 or 3 particular areas in our neighborhood in the Middle East that, and zoom in on them. And those will be the Palestinian Authority, Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the way forward on that, Syria and Iran. And obviously there's much more to say about the other areas as well. Perhaps before even going into that, I want to mention one more characteristic of the Middle East today that's not been prevalent before. And that is the rise of non-state actors. A few weeks ago, rockets were fired on Eilat, Israel's southern city, from the Sinai. To this day, I don't think that we have identified the identity of those who fired those rockets. Now, in the past, things were very simple. Even though we may have been outnumbered or at a military disadvantage, at least we knew when we were faced against an enemy, we knew who that enemy was. It had a name, the name of a country, it had the name of a ruler, it had a defined army with X number of tanks, Y number of aircraft. We knew what we were standing up against, and we knew how to develop our response and how to create, and we succeeded to create deterrence against that player. But how do you create deterrence, and how do you maintain deterrence against someone who is anonymous, who is unidentifiable? And there are a growing number of such entities in the Middle East today. The whole Sinai Peninsula, that is part of Egypt, but still, it's become a no man's land. It's become a place like the Wild West, where terrorist organizations feel very free to open up shop and operate from there, and it's unmanageable. Syria, from a very strong centralized government, is being torn apart, as Libya was, into tribal and sectarian fiefdoms or warlords, or areas that pretty much govern themselves. And there's no clearinghouse, there's no clear address. What's going to happen if rockets are fired at Israel from unidentifiable non-state actors, from the Golan Heights, from Sinai? Very good question. I don't have the answer, but that's one challenge that we're facing, again, as a result of the breaking down of centralized governments, strong centralized governments in the region. And that pretty much leads to another characteristic of the Middle East today, again, as opposed to the era before the Arab Spring, which is the dominance or the significance of civic society. 3 years ago, in order to know the political and understand the political landscape and the direction, the trend that a country was going towards, all you had to do was unlock the psyche of the leader of that country, be it Mubarak in Egypt, Assad, or Gaddafi. Today, that's not the case, and we have to factor in also the public opinion, if you will, be it in Egypt, in Tahrir Square, in Tunisia, certainly in Syria. I want to very briefly go over kind of a little deeper deeper on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, talk a little bit about that, and then about Iran, and then if time allows it, on Syria. When we talk about the Palestinian entity, and I had a bit of trouble identifying it or articulating it before because it really breaks down into two. There's the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, headed by President Mahmoud Abbas, and there is Hamas in Gaza, headed by, or there are Palestinians in Gaza, headed by Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, not according to Israel's definition, according to the State Department's definition. So these are two totally separate entities. They don't talk to each other. They are rivals to one another. And the question is, who do we have peace with? Who do we talk to in order to eventually go across the hurdles of that separate us, that is Israel and the Palestinians? Well, we have taken a conscious decision that we want to talk, that we want to attain peace. Israel always had its hands stretched out for peace. And the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, in the West Bank, headed by Abu Mazen, is a partner that we would want to talk to in order to bypass the obstacles that are in our way between us and peace with the Palestinians. We've been sitting at the negotiating table for, it's been nearly 4 years, all by ourselves. And unfortunately, the Palestinian partner hasn't approached that table. Why? There are many reasons why. We could go into them maybe in the Q&A. But the reality is that in order to solve the conflict, any conflict between two parties, they have to sit and talk. They have to be prepared, each one of the parties, to pay a price or to make a compromise towards the other party. So as they approach the negotiating table, they have to be prepared to do that. Don't know yet what the price will be, but they have to be prepared for a compromise of some sort. It appears that the Palestinian Authority is not prepared to make any compromise at this point, which is perhaps why they're not approaching the negotiating table, or why they try to impose preconditions before stepping up to the negotiating table. But the reality is, in a nutshell, we have to talk. Both sides have grievances and issues. One of the issues we may have is what I just mentioned before. Why we're going to talk to you, Palestinian Authority. What good, how is that going to solve rockets being fired at us from Gaza? But we have to talk. We are determined to talk and negotiate and dialogue. We're waiting for the other side to do so as well. One last word about Iran, because I'm being signaled that I have 1 or 2 minutes left. So we'll leave Syria maybe for the Q&A part. I mentioned earlier that the Middle East is riddled with instability and uncertainty. That's not true for two countries. Israel, which is very stable, very strong, has a strong economy, has a strong democracy, has a strong society that withstood many significant challenges. That week of pillar of defense, when we operated in Gaza, over a third of the entire population in Israel was pretty much neutralized. Was in bomb shelters. You can imagine the effect that has on both morale and on the economy. People don't go to work. A third of the country didn't go to work for days. We think of the few days that Boston was shut down after the bombing there. What effect that had? We're a strong society. We know how to handle these situations also in terms of our fortitude. So Israel is one exception to that rule of instability and uncertainty. Iran, and certainly Iran's ambition to attain military nuclear capability is another exception. There have been several rounds of talks with Iran by the international community. countless resolutions on sanctioning Iran economically and diplomatically that have an effect. I mean, the situation of the Iranian economy is severe. They're in dire straits. The average Iranian on the street feels those sanctions. Yet, the one person in Iran that makes the decision on advancing on the military nuclear program, which is Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is moving very steadfastly in the direction and moving faster and faster by the day, installing more centrifuges of greater capacity and so on and so forth towards that aim. In a nutshell, what we think should be done in order to put him, and he is the only person relevant in this case, in a very simple dilemma. Military nuclear program, my political or personal survivability. That's the dilemma he has to be put in. He's not in that dilemma today. In order to put him in that dilemma, sanctions are a necessary condition, but they're not sufficient. Another necessary condition has to be a credible military option that he has to really grasp, feel, and fear. There was one time where Iran did put a halt to several components of its nuclear program. That was in 2003 when the US invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. And Iran was certain that it's going to be hit next. And so they put a halt to, never mind which components, but several components of their program, as a clear reaction to the anxiety they felt about being invaded or being hit by the United States. In other words, when there was a very clear military threat put on the table. There has to be one today, in our mind, in order to get the Iranian leadership to put an end to the Iranian nuclear program. Otherwise, they're going to continue operating under the UN umbrella and advance towards it. We're in a very precarious stage today, and that'll be my last sentence, where Iran is already a threshold state when it comes to its military nuclear capabilities. Many people assume that we'll know exactly when it will make a dash for it, and a dash for military nuclear capability, but I'm not so sure that we will, and I'm not so sure that even if we are aware, that it'll be in a timing where we're able to respond. That's why that threshold status, where it already exists, is so dangerous, and we mustn't let it move any further in this program. So I'll wind up here.